Welcome to NYC Jewelry Week 2022. We're the co-founders. I'm JB Jones.
And I'm Bella Naiman.
And we're really excited to welcome you to our 2022 virtual program here on our official YouTube page. Please go hit subscribe and also head to our website at nycjewelryweek.com to see all the other amazing programs, both in person and virtually this year. And Bella's going to tell us what's coming up next.
Thanks, JB. This panel is in support of the exhibition, the online exhibition, I should say, Queerphoria, and it features Sue Loby, Tracy Carswell, and Rebecca Frank. If you have any questions for the participants, please feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll make sure to share it with them. Thanks so much and enjoy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Tracy Carswell, and I'm one of the co-founders of Queer Metalsmiths. Queer Metalsmiths is a community where we honor, center, and uplift LGBTQIA+ jewelers and metalsmiths. We're a safe space for queer artists to connect and support each other through visibility within the metalsmithing field. Queer Metalsmiths is building a culture where all queer metalsmiths' experiences are seen, heard, and supported.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sue Loby. I am a co-founder of Queer Metalsmiths. Earlier this year, we decided to begin a virtual project, Queerphoria. Through this exhibition, we focused on asking artists a series of questions, collecting responses, pairing it with their work, and housing it on a digital platform to increase visibility and accessibility. We invite you to learn a little bit more about the project by looking at our website, which we will link in the chat for you. We are excited to introduce our panel moderator, Rebecca Frank.
Rebecca Frank is a studio artist, independent writer, and arts administrator. Her creative practice focuses on steel. She explores themes of protection, vulnerability, and boundaries in her work. She also has a writing practice focused on amplifying artists' voices. Her articles highlight queer makers and artists using non-traditional material practices. She recently participated in a 4-month-long digital residency with Craftspace in the UK. Through the project, over 100 queer makers participated with their perspectives shared in the exhibition Queer and Metals. A second iteration of the exhibition opens at the Midlands Arts Center on July 12th, as well as an upcoming article in the Journal of Modern Craft. Today, we have 3 artists from the Queerphoria exhibition joining us on our panel: J. Taryn Diamond, Matt Lambert, and V. Miller. Together, we will dive deeper into their responses to the questions asked during the project and learn more about their studio practice.
J. Taryn Diamond is a metalsmith and interdisciplinary craft artist based in Athens, Georgia, where they study and teach at the University of Georgia. Outside of the studio, Diamond is an advocate for Black people in academia and works to dismantle the systemic barriers that make higher education inaccessible to Black people. Matt Lambert is a non-binary, trans, multidisciplinary collaborator and co-conspirator working towards equity, inclusion, and reparation. Their practice is based in entangling, making, writing, curating, collaborating, and performing. Lambert is currently a PhD candidate in craft at Konstfack in Stockholm, Sweden, and has published, curated, exhibited, and collected internationally. Black Queer Magic New York represents the creative, professional, and spiritual journey of VBM LMSW, a Black queer Jamaican-born woman. They are a self-taught artist as well as a licensed clinician with formal training and working with LGBTQ communities. You can learn more about each artist via our website and the artist's social media channels. We have linked their Instagrams and websites in the chat for you, and we will hand it over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation and for doing this work that you're doing to put people in conversation about interesting questions and topics relating to identity and making. And thank you, New York City Jewelry Week, for providing a platform for us to be able to speak on these issues and to have other people be able to watch and join in. So a few things before we get started. I want to respectfully acknowledge that I'm on the Ramatash Ohlone land. They are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula where I now live. And, you know, as we acknowledge ancestors and the past histories, it's also important to recognize that this area is also the home of the Black Panthers and the AIM American Indian movement, including the takeover of Alcatraz Island. It's also the home of current Native American people who are continuing to contribute to the creative culture of our country, including Tommy Orange, who wrote They're There, based in Oakland. It's a really fantastic story. I am a white, short-haired, glasses-wearing person with freckles, and I'm wearing so much black it all just blends in together. Behind me on a white wall is some jewelry, and everybody is welcome to share if they desire their land acknowledgement and their image description as they speak. It's not required. So the work that I did with the digital residency was really about asking similar questions about queerness and identity and making. And one of the things that came from it is a lot of people talked about transformation, affirmation, and expression throughout their answers. And the answers came from all over the world. It was really, really fascinating. So when Tracy and Sulu began this project that focused on the joy and the queerphoria for this exhibition, I was really interested to see what people had to say. So this is really exciting to be in conversation with Jay, Maddie, and V. Thank you all for being here and for answering those questions. I know it's hard sometimes to sit down and think through these kind of strange questions that pop out of the blue. So the first question that we're going to discuss is the work queer because the maker is queer, or is it because the subject matter is queer? So V, you talked about how your work centers Black, Indigenous people of colors as the audience, so that you're making work for them. And then you also talked about something I found really interesting, which is the metal bender connection. So don't forget to unmute yourself and share what you think about those two areas in relation to your practice.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really proud to be in this space. One of the things that helped me that guide my practice has been around intentionality. Who do I want my audience to be? Why am I creating? What is the point of it all? And for me, coming from a place of lack and not having had resources or having had even opportunities to create jewelry, I wanted to create a space that was intentional about centering people whose experiences are similar to mine. As a Black queer person, as a migrant, as someone that meets all these different intersections, I wanted to create something that was different than what I had seen before. And so to me, that's where the bridge between the idea of metal bending comes into play. If you've ever seen Avatar or heard of Avatar, there are earth benders, there are metal benders, there are all kinds of benders that work with the elements. And specifically metal benders created a world that was very different for themselves than any other world that they had seen before. And so that parallel to me is like really important, because with my jewelry practice, I'm not only creating jewelry, I'm also teaching other people how to make jewelry. I'm also being intentional about making sure that the adornment is reflective of the spiritual experiences of folks, the magic of Black queer folks. I also am very intentional in my therapeutic practice. I see predominantly LGBTQ folks as a clinician. And in those spaces, I'm also able to bridge the gap between all of those things that are important to me.
Wonderful. I think it's really important to think about that intentionality that you started with as the focus and the drive. And going to Jay, one of the things that you talked about is the loop between the maker, the subject, the maker, and back again, this kind of self-reflection and exploration of identity. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the way that that I work in relation to the ways in which I consider my work Black and queer has to deal with the fact that I unpack a lot of my own Blackness and queerness in my work. And because of that, I'll often understand my identity in one way, and then I will go to make work about the way that I understand that identity. Mm-hmm. And as my understanding of the work changes, I think that also sort of informs the way I understand my own identity. And I also think that I, in perfect honesty, can't remember the entirety of my answer for this question. It was a while ago, but I also think that my work is queer even when the subject matter isn't queer. And I think part of that is because I understand the ideas that I'm like responding to in my work, or the themes that I'm including in my work, from like a perspective that is inherently informed by queerness. And like as those things then inform what work I'm making, they understand the way that I am then thinking about those themes further.
Yeah, and that connects to V's work as I just wanted to say clinician, but therapist, I think is probably the better word, right? Yeah, thank you. Therapist, when helping people kind of discovering through making is really powerful, and being able to kind of explore that. And then Matt, I want to get your voice in here as well, of course. Welcome. I think one of the things that you mentioned in your answer was queerness was relational to time and space. And I wanted to hear more of your thoughts on that, and maybe how it might connect to what Jay and V are saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that. I'm Maddie Lambert, they, them pronoun as listed, and I am a bearded body with my hair pulled back in a bun, wearing some Teresa Ferris earrings and an Andy Laurie large necklace. And my background is a large amount of books, as I am in my office currently. And I'm located in Sweden, so it is dark outside. Yeah, I have that was a very weird thing, and I've been grappling with this idea of queerness, because queerness is always defined in opposition, or the idea of needing to thrive or find space, and really navigating through the way bell hooks or like Jose Esteban Munoz define it. And queerness is always about the movement towards something or away from something, or yeah, it's really invested in time and how we think about it. And so I'm not sure if I am comfortable where I'm at in my own practice by declaring something queer, because I think it is also potentially subjective in an artistic sense. I think like politically in a body and other spaces, there's maybe a different answer to be had. But I've been really trying to think about reading more about what is a queer aesthetics, or what does queerness actually look like. And I'm also concerned of, if we define what a queer aesthetics looks like, is it still queer because it's being normatized? So when does queer become queer normative? And that's really my concern. So that question kind of really succinctly hit at that point of, yeah, like when is something centered and when is something marginal? And can we forever be queer? Do we want to forever be queer? Is the goal to not be queer? Do we want to normalize our bodies? And that's a very sticky and intense question to ask. And ultimately, I don't think we're going to get there in any of our lifetimes, but I'm very utopic in that idea and trying to think in those terms.
And just for people in the audience who might not realize, queer is an identity, queer is politics, queer is art theory, a theoretical framework for art making. So it gets really sticky because we're using one word in multiple ways. And just to acknowledge, it's also been a slur, and some people still find it to be a slur. So it's a pretty sticky term that is really, really, I think one of the reasons we're here is because it's alive right now. It's something that's very activated, and I mean, honestly, it's been alive for a while. I just want to give Jay and Via a chance to respond to anybody who's spoken, and then we'll move to the next one, the next question.
Yeah, I think that Matt has a very good point about like the question of what, like not only what is queer, but what we want to consider queer and what we want queerness to mean. I do think it's worth noting that I like consider my work to be queer, but a large part of that is that because I make work largely in response to like the material conditions of my own life and my surroundings. And within those surroundings, you know, rural Georgia, being queer is very queer.
Yeah, and to recognize that the project that I did was all over the world, and queerness is very different depending on where you are. It's either I'm in San Francisco, where queer is like much more normalized, to Maddie's point. But then, we had people from other rural areas of America and also from other countries where, the threat of violence and the act of being in any way different was still very dangerous and very marginalized. So I think it's important to hold space for that. V.
Yeah, Rebecca, I'm glad that you mentioned that. As someone that is born in Jamaica, that is still one of the places where queer identity, LGBTQ identity is still met with a lot of violence. There has been a lot of progress. Like, we recently had a few pride parades and pride events, which has been really wonderful and really progressive. But it's still an island that is full with a lot of hatred towards people that are queer. And so, in me being a Jamaican born person who is very out and very loud, and I have been since I was like 13 years old, it's an act of resistance. And I think, to me, that's the way that I interpret queerness. I'm not sure what it looks like. It can look like somebody rocking a head wrap, wearing all white, or someone wearing Doc Martens and a leather jacket. We never know. But to me, it's more than just how it looks. It is what it's rooted in. And so that's how I identify queerness.
Yeah, and as the listeners have the opportunity to go and see the different work and the different responses to these answers for the queerphoria exhibition online, you'll see just a wide variety of work, as well as a wide variety of identities and presentations. So it's really important to make sure that we don't think that it is definable. It's kind of the power of the queer space is that it isn't. Yeah. The next question is about how your studio practice might influence your identity, like your making, I think, Jay, you spoke to this already, but how your making kind of is like a assertion of self and a place for exploration. But can you talk more about the studio practice itself, how it might have helped you become, I don't know, more confident or more, I don't know what?
I think that it's very like, I find it very important that I make jewelry. Oftentimes I'm making jewelry for my own body that then goes to live on other people's bodies. But I find that it is important for me to make jewelry, partially because the making process of jewelry is often very like labor intensive and detail oriented in ways that often like prompt meditation on my relationship with my own body. But also because it necessitates a very conscious consideration of the body that I think is very like necessary for facilitating my understanding of like how I exist within this body as a queer person, how my body exists in relationship to gender, and like all of those various facets of my identity as a queer person.
Could you give me an example of that?
So I make a lot of work out of hair, mostly synthetic hair. But I'm like, when I'm working with this, I'm like interested in hair as a form of adornment, but then I'm also interested in hair as like this token of femininity, and like the ways that embracing and displaying that token of femininity like helps me to experience gender euphoria within my body.
Yeah, and I understand you're doing a project with Funlola Coker that is connected to this. Are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah, so Funlola and I are participating in a duo exhibition that's also going to be part of New York City Jewelry Week at Industry City, where we're both sort of unpacking our relationship to braids within the context of the African diaspora. my work is largely coming from the perspective of like a tool for accomplishing gender euphoria, and like a means of feeling at home in my body. And then I am not sure how much of that is present in Funlala's work. I admittedly haven't talked to her much about like the queerness that I perceive in hair. But she is making work that largely deals with like hair as a tool for connecting to a community, which I also think is in a lot of ways something that is like a necessarily queer conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Maddie, Maddie, you talked in at least part of your answer about the difficulty, well, not, I should say difficulty, the evolution that you've had. We're thinking at one point you and your work were inseparable, your identity and your work were connected. And then at some point you kind of started to separate that. And you talked about capitalism and forms of approval, like kind of getting approval from, I'm assuming, the marketplace, but also possibly peers and things like that. So that it kind of got a little messy there, and I wasn't able to tease out from your response where you stand and where your studio practice and your identity kind of are merging. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm still actually answering that part of the question. So that's probably why you,
as a PhD student, full of questions and
why you can tell. No, I think when I finished my time with my master's at Cranbrook, I really was making objects that were really for me in grad school. They were objects of protection and for the self, and they were really intimate in a way. And then I really evolved into making rooms and spaces and worlds and demanding more presence of my body, but also developing an ability to share community, but also thinking about the spaces that were available. Also, like I often think about the gay bar, and is that a queer friendly space, or is it still a normative space for a lot of us that are queer? And just kind of spaces like that, and like how does one queerly animate history or extract or think about possibilities, because queerness is potentially all around us. And so how do we possibly find ways to explore that? And that's really allowed me to zoom out, though, also on myself and look back, because my practice really doesn't deal with linear time. And so it still uses objects I made during my time in grad, my master's. And so it's really caused me to rehash and also rethink my identity again. And there's a slipperiness, and I'm not a fan of names, let alone my name. And I'm not really questioning these labels or these positions and boxes that we put ourselves in. And grappling with what that means. And so I really view my practice as a potential to shatter myself every day and rebuild myself. Mm-hmm. More interested in how to destroy things, and what is the craft of the destruction of worlds. And I mean, that's really where I sit, and it's really an exploration of like what does transness mean to me, and what are the pressures of feeling the need to fit into another box. And my practice really also, as far as approval, is like, it doesn't necessarily always fit in a jewelry gallery anymore. And now it might not even fit in a craft gallery anymore. And so like, what is it? And what am I? And it's like, maybe my work really is me, because I'm not fitting in a box too well these days. So my work shouldn't fit in a box anymore either, again. But like, as Jay had pointed, it's kind of this cycle of it. And I think I'm just kind of coming back again on the wheel to revisit, but from maybe a different vantage point or a different point on the map.
Yeah. And you mentioned this kind of like almost, you use these very powerful words of, destroying and, kind of rebuilding and world building and things, and which is very, very important. I think in the essay for the Queer Metal project, I mentioned that sometimes these labels and boxes are just useful as tools to build your identity, to kind of climb, to use one and then get rid of it when it doesn't work anymore, as you start to explore yourself more. V, you talked about it, your studio practice as healing. So for Matt, there, these more like raw words of destruction and stuff, but for you, in the same way, actually, kind of healing and discovery of self, and then also spiritual. So you can talk about that.
Yeah, I actually really love some of the things that Maddie just shared. There's this quote by Stacey Ann Chin that says, if you don't know who Stacey Ann Chin is, she is a Jamaican poet who has been an out and proud lesbian poet and advocate for the LGBTQ community for a very, very long time, and has done amazing work to champion and to really make possible the voices of other Jamaican folks to step forward and to be safe and to create spaces both in Jamaica and outside of Jamaica. But she has this really wonderful quote that I actually just pulled up. And she says that starving artists or starving people make the best revolutionaries. Because when you're hungry, it's easy to get angry about things that aren't right. There are those nights where you are just so emotionally present that you crack yourself open and it works. And so I really resonated with what Maddie shared about like this rebirthing process over and over again. And I see that in myself and in my practice. I have been delving a lot more into astrology lately. And I have a Scorpio stellium, which Scorpio is about life and death and rebirth. And some of those charts are housed in my creative space, in my space of work. And what I found is that my studio practice, when I initially started, it was as a means to survive. It was like, how the hell do I get through? I was a very young person. I had just aged out of foster care. I was about 22 or 23 at the time. I aged out when I was 21. And I just wanted to find something that could help me to stay stable, that could help me to pay my rent, that could help me to figure out what it was that I wanted and needed from my life. And so from that experience, I started what I called my passion path. And I was like, you know what? I just graduated from college. How about I take a year off and figure out what it is that I want to do? Does everyone else get to do this? Do white folks get to do this? Perhaps. Can I get to do this? We'll see. And so it was in that initial space that I started realizing, okay, I am creative. Having experienced a history of abuse, there was like a lot of rejection of creativity. My artistic endeavors, my curiosity, self-expression, which is something that is unfortunate for some Black queer folks, that that self-expression and self-identity is kind of not valued very early on. And so creating allowed me to be like, okay, I am creative, I am artistic, and really affirm for myself that I was able and capable of creating something beyond myself and creating something with meaning for myself. And as I centered not just my own story and my own experience, but also finding out that there are other Black queer Jamaican young people that also have all these weird intersections, was just a really beautiful way to figure out what healing could look like for me. Yeah. And so before I even got into my own private therapy, before I even became a therapist, jewelry was my first form of healing. Yeah. And it really helped me to begin that process. And so over time, my relationship to jewelry has also changed. It has changed to I am more rooted in the spiritual aspect of it. I practice a traditional African spiritual practice that centers nature, that centers our relationship to nature. And metals is a part of that practice as well. And so it's definitely shifted over time. But I've been creating in the same corner of my studio apartment for the last 6-7 years. And it's just really beautiful to see that even though there's stability here now, that I have changed and my relationship to the work has changed. But my values and my missions have remained the same, which is really beautiful to see.
Yeah, and V, you mentioned the community as something that's really important within this. And this wasn't one of the formal questions, but I am curious, so I'm going to ask you and give Jay and Maddie a little time to think on it. Can you talk a little bit more about how the community, whatever that community was for you, helped bring you through that journey of healing and kind of finding that space? And the blessing of jewelry is that it can be done in the tiny little corner of your studio, but there's also, you know, maybe community within different kinds of studio places.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started my what I called passion path back in the day, I had a GoFundMe page and I listed like all the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to make jewelry. I wanted to do community organizing. I wanted to do bartending. I even wanted to do burlesque. And so I created this GoFundMe asking for help to kind of get some of the resources to pay for the bartending class, to go to this wonderful opportunity to do community organizing in Oakland, to purchase my first set of jewelry supplies. And the community response was overwhelming. People supported all of it. And I was able to do almost all the things that were on my list. I was able to go to Oakland for the community organizing internship. I was able to purchase my first set of jewelry supplies. And I was also able to really ground myself in the fact that I was supported on this journey. And so those were the beginning stages. And over time, I have shared behind the scenes with folks the process and the progress of what it's like to be a self-taught jewelry artist. It has been a struggle, and people have uplifted and supported, shared my work, purchased my work. And at times, I was only living off of my jewelry. So folks would uplift me by sharing spaces to vend, by resharing, by purchasing. And so being held and being supported and uplifted by folks that not only believed in my vision, but also wanted to see a young Black femme win, really helped me to get to the point in my journey of where I'm at right now.
Fantastic.
And so community is huge for me, and I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah, you know, I think of this project as a community project that's kind of bringing people together. So, yeah, Maddie, what about you and community? How have you seen it working, or for you, or not? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, community is I think why I am the way I am, how I got here in a way. I mean, I started making big work because my best friend walked in house balls and needed pieces really, and really encouraged. And I had a few things around that were experiments, and then we met and they were like, can I have this? Can I wear this? What is going on? Why are you doing this, you weirdo? Like, and really just encouraged it. And, you know, and we also then became bartending coworkers. And I think also something to be clear is like, I have a very unconventional path in which like, I didn't live off of my work for many years. I worked 60 hours behind bars and also found a way to also make work. And I think I would love to see more honesty with people in creative fields, especially within the crafts, of what we do to actually make our money versus what we do because we need to do it, because we live to do it, because it helps us find community. But yeah, I mean, that really is what's rooted, is being in downtown Detroit and largely crediting Black femme POC white queer bodies that just recognize that when we needed to do something, there wasn't a question of why. There wasn't I need to understand. It was I just got you. And go do it. And who needs money for a studio, whether it's to podcast, a DJ, to have a photo shoot, who has the camera, who can do what degree, you know, who can trade and swap in how you need to do it. And I think being here is a larger shock in that way of people really, you know, having unions and wanting to be fully paid at all times and covered. And it's a very beautiful system, but it's a very radically different thing. And so I'm struggling here physically to find community. It's happening very slowly as I'm living here for
in Stockholm.
Yes, in Stockholm, in Sweden. But I mean, I still my connections back to Detroit or in other places around the world. I have a different form of queer kinship, queer family that's been built So no matter what time zone I'm in, there's at least one body that we can support each other. But yeah, I think that is invaluable. And I also think that there is a other communities found within jewelry that are also fruitful and can be healthy and really incredible.
Yeah, thank you. And Jay, community is just so powerful, as we're hearing from V and Maddie. And I want to just invite you to share. Do you have a perspective on community and how it's helped you develop as a jeweler or as a person?
I think that there are like a couple different perspectives that I have on this. And the first is that like the sort of community of people immediately around me is often more reliable for like material needs or access or like things that are necessary to either like continue having a practice or even like simply make ends meet than institutions often are. I, like for example, I incurred some pretty hefty hospital bills after I caught COVID earlier this year. And I had a lot of like people in my community helping me to like offset those medical expenses that I, to save my life, really and truly could not get any emergency grant fund to cover. But I also think that like having a community that is like engaged in the things you're working towards is very important to understanding what's possible. For example, something that I've been like thinking about a lot more this year than perhaps in years past is that I didn't necessarily know Sulo right as they were finishing their undergraduate degree, but like seeing Sulo's work even online before I knew them was a big motivator in me like deciding to change my degree from some like just another STEM degree into like pursuing art and pursuing working with metal because it was the first time that I had like seen a person who was like very visibly queer and like very visibly not a part of the normative culture, like being taken very seriously and respected. And I think that really changed my understanding of what was possible for myself.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And I want to, we have an audience here, and we don't know who's in this audience, this digital audience in front of us. So just to say, you can hear from Jay, V, and Maddie how important community can be and how different it can look. The queer space is not a monolith. As Maddie pointed out, gay clubs aren't always welcoming, and there's many other spaces that might be part of the LGBTQIA+ rainbow. But they're not always the safest spaces. So the people around you, that first circle, is really powerful. And then finding other ways to be collaborative or creative, other communities that are creative or collaborative are really helpful, that can bring inspiration and give you direction, perhaps. I always encourage students to look at people's CVs or websites if they're listed publicly to see where they went and where they showed, and it's kind of like a little bit of a pathway to give you some guidance. I just taught a weekend workshop in Haystack, Mountain School of Craft on Deer Isle in Maine. That was rural high school students, one from each school, so they didn't know each other, coming together to just be in community. And they're 16 and 17, and it was a really powerful experience just to see them see themselves and other people their age, and that all the teachers were queer, all the chaperones were queer. So just being able to see the potential, so that there's so much, there's different ways to find community. Community means different things. It can just be a few people, and it can be a virtual space as well. Thank you. Oh, I have chills, y'all. We're gonna go back to the questions that you are maybe a little bit more rooted in, specifically related to material. Jay, you talked about this a little bit already. I want to give V and Maddie a chance to talk about if queerness affects your material choices. and what that can look like. And Jay, of course, you can jump back in if you have more to add from what you shared previously. So let's start with Maddie this time. Material choices. I know it's big. It's a big one.
Yeah, my material choices. I mean, I'm always also super excited to hear other people around this. The definitions we even use is what is a jeweler, what is a metalsmith. Yeah, I've been put in some circumstances recently, professionally. It's like, when is someone a metalsmith and when they're not? Yeah, my material choices instinctually, I love grappling with what a lot of people maybe call the found object or these ideas. And I don't think of it as that. I really like loaded objects that have a lot of intense history on them. A lot of my work deals with sport, the history of a lot of sports and its connections to violence. Ballet has a connection to war. These kind of very puzzling ideas, or a lot of my work stems from, there's a saying in law that's in a lot of sports in the US, injuria, which means a willing participant cannot cause violence. So if you're damaged during sports in any way, you cannot essentially sue or claim harm. And so that led me to thinking about what is life? Am I willingly participating in life when I walk out in public as a queer body? And so if I'm harmed, what does that mean? And so a lot of my material choices come from those areas, and it is about referencing specific historical things and world rooms, and also questioning what is newness. Do I need to make something new? Do I need to fabricate something new? I'm tending to usually salvage things and rip them apart or deal with them. I have an obsession with restoring or replicating objects that already exist in the world to make many, to use in larger pieces. And that's just kind of followed me now. Like when I lived in Michigan, like a lot of northern Michiganders have some very strange hobbies of chain carving and floral beads and these things. And they just found my way to me. And then I was like, oh, can I save it, whatever that means? And can I use it? Can I make more of it? What does it mean? Is that a connection to a form of a community that maybe I would never connect with? And I really see that more as my work now. I'm less concerned with the object. I'm more interested in having a conversation with Mickey at the McDonald's parking lot that I drove 3 hours up north to pick up military stretchers when he asked the question, why do you want these, out of an old Boy Scout camp? That for me is more of the work, or the intriguing thing that the objects start to facilitate. And I'm more interested in talking about that as craft, these ideas of community making in unexpected ways, and also in the ways we need. And the objects just kind of start to represent, for me, what the work is. They're mapping points for larger ideas and concepts.
Nice, yeah. And the power of a reutilized object taken out of context that still holds that history is really it's a powerful place to play. Yeah. V, I think for what I remember from what you were saying in your response to this question was about the cultural aesthetics of Blackness. And I'm not sure how that was connecting to the material specifically. So can you share about that?
Yeah, so I shared earlier that I do have a specific spiritual practice. And so that practice uplifts the relationship to nature. And it is a practice that is pretty common, and it's becoming more common. And so in my work, one of the things that I really pride myself on is working with pieces that, when I say pieces, I mean crystals, metals that can uplift and amplify certain things. So I work with like malachites, I work with copper, I work with opalite, I work with leather, I work with all kinds of different textures and different colors and elements that can be a source of spiritual enlightenment, a source of spiritual grounding, a source of spiritual connection. So there are a lot of folks that share with me that sometimes they'll purchase pieces to put on their altars, for instance. There are folks that purchase like copper pieces to help with arthritis. So there is a very specific and particular relationship that I love to enhance on and to play on. Some of the pieces that I worked with in my earlier years. So I did wire wrapping, and then I started with coppersmithing, and then I worked my way up to silversmithing, metalsmithing. Those pieces are still pieces that I think are rooted in the same spiritual practice. Where I am now in my relationship to metals, specifically with silver, is that I want to create pieces that can be heirloom pieces. Not to say that none of those pieces can't be heirloom pieces, but there is a specific relationship between silver and gold that represents something that's a little bit more longer lasting and that can be inherited, that can be. And so right now in my practice, I'm really interested in that relationship, in what it means to create engagement rings for queer folks that are interested in getting married, what it means to create pieces for people that want to pass them on in the future, want to be remembered as the fly uncle, the fly whoever in their family. And so those are the thoughts that I have behind working with silver and hopefully gold one day. And I think too, something to note is that moving from wire wrapping to silversmithing, the support, specifically in the jewelry community, that I have received is very different. When I was first wire wrapping and I was like, wait, I love this, I want to learn more. How can I learn more? How can I get access to community schools? How can I learn formally? What I found was a lot of resistance. What I found was you can only have 2 wire wrapped pieces in your portfolio, or else you can't learn. Or I had gotten like direct feedback from one jewelry school that was just like, this is not jewelry. This is just creating. It's a hobby. It's not a form of jewelry or a form of art. So for a long time, I didn't identify as an artist. I didn't even know that you can go to school for metalsmithing. I had no idea that these were things that could be supported, nourished, and amplified. And I think in particular, one of the reasons why I bring that up is that there are a lot of Black people that wire wrap, that use that particular practice as a form of creativity, as a form of spiritual upliftment, creating ankh pieces, creating pieces that make them feel beautiful and adorned. And to have those practices invalidated versus now with silversmithing, there's a little bit more value that's placed on the work, that's placed on the metals, that's placed on me as an artist, and that I am amplified now. If it was about 5 years ago, I don't know if I'd even be in this space as a wire wrap artist versus now as a metalsmith. Probably went off topic, but
No, it's good. I actually was noting that you, V, as a self-taught artist, and then Maddie's getting his PhD. I have my master's. Jay, where are you in your pathway?
I am in my last year of my MFA.
Yeah. So, like there absolutely was a time where self-taught artists weren't part of these conversations. And as you're saying, wire wrapping is just, looked askance at from the platform of academia. So thank you. So that is really important to acknowledge and to look for ways to open up those conversations and to understanding other ways of respecting different kinds of making that are all valuable. Native American beadwork is another one that it's not in academia, it's in a separate space. So I was recently at the Baltimore Jewelry Center, and there was a jeweler there that was just doing the most amazing wire wrapping I've ever seen in my life. And it was blowing my mind because I haven't seen a lot of it. So yeah, it's really important to have that. Thank you for bringing it up. Jay, you talked a little bit before about the materials that you were using, and I apologize. I actually had read in my notes that V was the cultural aesthetics of Blackness. It was actually you. Apologies. That you were specifically working with things that were maybe could be campy or effeminate. I think that you talked about that a little bit. If you don't mind talking a little more about it.
Yeah. In my jewelry practice, I'm very interested in like using loud, bright colors that we don't necessarily associate with masculinity. And I'm also interested in using like means of bodily adornment that aren't necessarily associated with masculinity. Like right now, I have like a very specific focus on the box braid, which is like historically like women's hairstyle. And I'm like interested in like leveraging those on my body as a body that like went through testosterone puberty and looking at how the gendered expectations of these like colors or techniques interact with what would otherwise be perceived as a masculine body. I'm also increasingly interested in like material as an actor and an analog. So I think about like what happens if I like interpret this material as the body, and if I like engage in these these processes on these materials, how does that like inform my understanding of these as a body or as an analog for the body? And to that end, I think a lot about like treating these like flimsy pieces of hair and these like very effeminate, like aesthetically effeminate objects with like an extreme amount of dignity in jewelry objects.
Nice. Yeah, and I think in one of your responses, you talked about queerphoria specifically. I think you might have been the only one who used the word that you were looking for your own discovery of queerphoria with your work. I can't remember exactly the phrases, Jay, I apologize. But can you talk about what queerphoria means to you?
I think that for me, queerphoria is like this ability to love yourself despite not having a normative experience or a normative body that sort of follows the grappling that is necessary to come to terms with that experience and that body. I think it's sort of the way that you are able to experience yourself with joy after you not necessarily finish, because I don't think anyone has ever finished unpacking queerness, but after you're fully engaged in the process of unpacking your queerness and understanding what it means for you to like exist in spaces as a queer individual.
I just took a quick peek, and one of the things that really struck me about your answer to whatever question that was your mention of kindness.
Yeah, I think that like when you're like operating with the expectation that you should strive to be normative or that normativity is expected, there often is like this unspoken assumption that people who fail to meet that standard of normativity either don't deserve kindness or shouldn't treat themselves with kindness. I think a lot about like the idea of like the self-hating gay man as a trope. And I think that after you sort of begin unpacking what it means for you to like exist in spaces and in societies as a queer individual, you regain the ability to treat yourself with kindness, and you are often much more willing to extend that kindness to yourself.
Yeah, that's so powerful, Jay. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I remember that coming up, and the other project from earlier this year, kindness and queerness, and it being kind of a necessary part of it, to be accepting and welcoming and doing your best to be as inclusive as possible and to respect people's choices and not to judge, which of course we're having a huge problem with in this country right now. So I think kindness is so important to speak to. Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's so powerful. V, would you like to talk about what queerphoria might mean to you in whatever way? It's kind of an open-ended question.
Yeah, I have been reflecting on what it means to me. I originally was like, this is one I have to think about a little bit longer. But I think that as I have been able to reflect on it a little bit more, I think again about Avatar and their relationship to the earthbenders and the metalbenders. Right? So the metalbenders, they were able to create worlds that were rooted in their resistance. So basically, earthbenders, after the 100-Year War, they were like being captured, and they were just experiencing a lot of ridicule and a lot of oppression. And once they were able to recognize the trace elements of metal, or of earth, rooted in metal, rooted in their jails, in their cages, they were able to break free. And once they were able to break free, they were able to cultivate and harness that particular power to metal bend and to create entire new worlds, entire new arms of protection, entire new meanings of what it meant to be someone existing. And I think similarly, as a queer person, I am able to choose what I want to bend to. I'm able to choose what I want to adhere to as normative. I am able to decide what is normative for me and what is not normative. And I think that creating a world that I see for myself and that I see for other people, where I hope it's rooted in kindness, I hope it's rooted in spiritual love and protection. I hope that it's rooted in the ability for Black LGBTQ folks to thrive and beyond survive. I shared my journey of hustling and of going through all the things that I went through. But I think it's also important to talk about the fact that there are a lot of Black LGBTQ people thriving, and we're doing well, and not everyone's experience is rooted in trauma and oppression. But at the same time, there are some of us who are still in the trenches, who are still experiencing a lot of that. And I think that it's our responsibility to support and uplift each other. And to me, that's what queerphoria is. It's working together to get to a point where not just queerness being normalized, but instead working to a place where we are respected, where we're valued, no matter what that queerness looks like, where joy is amplified, no matter whether or not you're queer or not.
Yeah, nice. Yes. Queerness, kindness, compassion, like just welcoming people. It's really powerful. And again, we have an audience here. There's people listening. I think it's so important for us to speak these out loud and to remind people that it isn't all trauma, that there is also joy. There is also hope and possibility, even as we move through what is, it's a rough time out there. Maddie, please share your view on queerphoria. What does it mean to you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that was also, these questions really are like, woof, we're like really like going back to therapy again. As everybody should do, no matter what state of mind you're in.
Go CV.
I'm also a trained cognitive behavioral therapist, so past life career. But I think I always like the word witness. I think we all just want witnesses and to be witnessed, but more importantly, as a queer body, to be witnessed when we are in, I hate the word authentic, but like when we are being and doing what we feel is most authentic or closest to who we want to be. And I think witnessing joy is very important, as pointing out the importance of joy, but I also think that there's an incredible feeling to be able to cry from queer heartache on another person that just can witness it and hold it. And I think holding and witnessing in all aspects of our life, to me, like that is actual queerphoria. And I think it is a privilege to have a position as a maker in which we maybe can create objects to illustrate or welcome or give easier access or entry points to signal to people, you know, our needs or desires, or to build bridges and connections with people. There's also dangers in that as well. But yeah, I really think it just boils down to wanting to be witnessed for who we feel we are.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, these kinds of projects, this panel, being able to talk to the New York City Jewelry Week audience and beyond. This will be on YouTube for an unknown period of time, and being able to see the work and to see people's words and be able to follow them online and kind of be, you know, look into their life and see. I think it's really powerful for people to be able to know people like Jay and V and Maddie are out there in the world and making work, and it's all really different and it's coming from different places and experiences. I want to pull back to V's pointing out of the different intersectionalities of identity. You can be, you know, multiple things. It's not just queer. There's other things that influence your way of being in the world. In V's case, being an immigrant and also being a therapist. And it really matters. All these things were not a single thing. So I know on my Queer Art Words page, I have resources pinned at the top for different kinds of places that are safe spaces for makers. Queer Metalsmiths does a lot of work in the Instagram space as well. So yeah, thank you all for bringing all your thoughts and sharing, as Tracy's saying in the chat, so vulnerably, to open up and tell people about your practice and your choices and your pathways. And I'd like to invite Tracy and Sulu back into the space to thank them for letting us have this space to talk on about these topics. Thank you so much.
This has been so amazing.
Oh my gosh. What
I have been
a beautiful conversation.
Really.
And thank you all, you know, for, Rebecca, thank you for, you know, just the flow in conversation. And Jay, V, and Maddie, thank you for bringing your full authentic selves to this conversation and the work you do and who you are in the world and how you impact people. It's really, this has been a delicious conversation.
It's been amazing. I've been back here crying. I'm trying not to cry right now. It's been so wonderful. And Jay, thank you for saying that. I think we all live in our own bubbles of like we don't know the impact that we have on the world. And hearing you say that about my presence in your life, like I broke down crying. It really means a lot to me. And Maddie, V, both of you being vulnerable and sharing so much about your life and the paths that you're on. I mean, it's incredible. The world's a scary place right now, and I'm so thankful that we have these moments. And as Tracy and I were furiously texting back and forth behind scenes, listening to both of y'all, all of y'all shine, you know, we get our reflection back in our queer community. Our queer peers are our mirrors, and it really has been wonderful to hear the overlaps, to hear all of you. I heard my own practice in every single one of y'all's voices, and that's just remarkable. I think that speaks volumes. And thank you, Rebecca, for leading this conversation with such beauty and grace and cool, calm, collected. So thank you, all of you, for joining us here today. And thanks for everybody for watching. And please check out queerphoria. We'll have everything linked in the description. It'll be housed for pretty much the rest of the year, and for the future it'll be like a permanent thing on our website, so all of you can view that and check it out. Please read what every artist has to say. I think it's really important. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.